Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of high-level thoughts on that. So, first thing is the ADKAR method is, I guess, to some degree, very widely used. I've always had this thought, and I've never really had a chance to talk about it. But this is our chance. Let's have a chat. So,
Okay. Yeah.
when we think about the decision, we have either a desire or awareness, or not desire or awareness. We have desire or commitment, which is the person making a decision. So, this is the formation of intent. I
Yes.
have the intent to go along with this change. And from my background, I was researching technology adoption, which is the technology acceptance, which is the formation of intent, which is the precursor to behavior.
Yes. So I
Now,
like better language. Yeah.
so if we think about that formation of intent, the difficulty that I have with the ADKAR model is nearly always that we say that knowledge, understanding the details of what the change needs to be, comes after the formation of intent. And that seems the wrong way round for me, because you can be aware of something but not really know the details. But how can you commit to a course of action without knowing the details? Where I've seen this work in practice, I've seen the decision making and the knowledge cycle basically be iterative. So we're releasing more information, we're putting efforts into our communication approach, we're making sure that we do some kind of user training and building the skills so that people can be informed. And when people are informed, then you go down this track of effectively informed consent, whether it's data collection or whether it's something else. But we have informed consent, and that then forms this intention to go along with the change process. So just, asking you to reflect a little bit on
answer
that.
to that, because it's a fabulous question. And it's been my concern as well that, really good change management use cases where I've seen detractors or people who are quite resistant actually shift has been only at that point where they truly start to understand and have full knowledge of the system and are brought in with the level of detail that sometimes is only planned later. The way ProSci have, whether they've changed up or not, I know that the most recent way in which they do their training is that they do say it is not linear. So it doesn't have to be linear. And it may be that you might need to apply the different phases at different times for different audience groups. So the most obvious ones there you can't change the reinforcement and the fact that awareness needs to start at the beginning and reinforcement at the end. But for some people, they need to dive straight in, and you won't actually get their full buy-in until that point at which they've been truly brought in and made aware of the full details, at which point it becomes really gnarly, because there are some people who'll be like, well, I wasn't consulted. This isn't the right way. We shouldn't be doing it this way. We shouldn't, which is the tension with, when I've seen, big implementation partners from the big four being brought in, and there's this tension between change management teams saying, well, we need to really bring some of these people involved. We need to get them involved. We need to get them into the validation sessions or the even pre-validation. We need to get more people involved. There's always this tension because they're saying, well, if we get too many voices, then it becomes too difficult, So some of it is done by stealth, it is honestly the way it's done. And then people are ending up in a position where they're having to accept what the out of the box thing is that has been agreed. I don't think there's really an easy way of getting around that, because sometimes it has to do with the way in which implementations are decided upon, where they know they're going to have a lot of resistance and they're going to implement certain things, and then people are going to have to grapple with it. But I do think that where we've made a specific intention as a change management team to bring certain resistors in early, give them more knowledge and really get them involved, that actually shifts things most. And that's to your point about you can't just do it in a linear fashion for some people. You can't take big groups and apply exactly the same linear approach to each of them. I'm very much a fan of mixing it up and changing it up and bringing in whatever's actually going to help people move within their kind of segment. What is it? Is it a focus group? I'm a big fan of focus groups, because you really get a bunch of people in the room together who, when they are the representative of a particular type of segment and they're voicing that, they then get the opportunity to hear from other sides around what is the other aspect of this, what's the other lens that we need to bring to it. And then they start to understand the slightly richer picture of it. So, to me, one of the most important kind of interventions to use is the focus group, but it needs to be run really well. It needs to be really well thought through and facilitated extremely well. But that's gold dust for, that's where I think you start to really shift people's minds, and you start to get them feeling that sense of commitment, that kind of moment of intent. They still might not be happy with every aspect of it, but they're starting to engage and they're starting to accept, and then actually make an important step in their minds to say, I'm going to be involved in this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And having the difference between waterfall and agile effectively in the approach.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, lots of change management bodies are I mean, there's so much that shifting and changing, where even agile is now being criticized as being, you can't just, lift and shift agile into certain environments and expect it to work. It needs all of the right infrastructure and all the right buy-in in order for agile to work. So yeah, I'm also sort of specialized in agile change management. But again, it becomes very complex when you try to apply a mix and match. Yeah, it's difficult. But essentially, there is a trend towards a more agile approach of meeting people where they are and applying whatever intervention is actually going to shift that group to the next level or to the next sort of stage of commitment.
Yeah, which implies there are stages of commitment, right? Because
yeah.
So change, I've looked at change in a couple of different areas, but change either at a strategic level. So we're looking at we need to move the organization from a current state to a target state, and we need to have a roadmap of activities, projects, a portfolio of things that we need to do to move from A to B, because the organization wants to be at this target state B, and there are things that need to happen to get there. Then there is the intervention stage. So we have a roadmap of interventions, and that's high level, that's change. The roadmap itself is a change. But then each intervention itself is an iterative change. It's a micro change. It's happening in a particular area, in a particular department, with a particular user group. And in an ideal world, the entire organization goes on this roadmap and eventually gets to where it wants to be. So when we look at each of these little changes, these in the learning and development and the human capital space, these would be the small interventions where we say we're going to deploy a particular bit of software. We're going to develop a chatbot or a virtual agent. We're going to buy a particular platform and embed that and implement it. So there might be these different stages that make up this journey. When we pivot slightly and think about the legal sector specifically, because that's what we're talking about, and last time when we were having this discussion, we were talking about things like document analysis and things like data analysis and getting through the drudgery of sifting through lots of boxes of data and looking at a particular case and thinking about what the case law out there is. And we talked about all of these kinds of things. Contracting, I think we talked about as well. But what are the big use cases that you're seeing in your client base in the legal sector when it comes to AI? Because there are going to be some that are tried and tested and kind of everybody's using these use cases. And there are going to be some that are emerging, and the potential future of work for the legal sector might be disrupted or changed by the emerging use cases. So what are the kinds of things you're seeing?
Okay, there are so many. So the most obvious ones that come to mind, if we look at the way in which law firms are engaging with large language models, there's been a huge, the one that I'm most familiar with is looking at Harvey. So Harvey it's a startup that just went to absolute success with certain big names taking on exclusive partnerships with it, where essentially it's helping all the lawyers to be able to engage safely with a large language model that they have decided has been trained in the right ways to be able to spit out the right kind of information that's not going to, hallucinate or whatever.
This is the GPT for law,
it's
kind of.
GPT for
right.
law, and that's oversimplifying it, but essentially it's GPT for law. But saying that, lawyers are using Copilot as well. For those who are within the Microsoft stack, but the ability to use a lawyer-trained large language model, that's Harvey. Please don't, let me oversimplify it just in that sense. But if you want to be really crude about it, it's that. But then there are other forms of AI-powered tools for document review, there's other types of tools, whether it be HiQ, there's Kira. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just aware of these tools being used. and I'm aware of the teams that have been trying to implement it and trying to work with these tools. So there's that. And then there's so many different types of new startups around contract drafting, contract automation. There's contract management platforms that have been also proliferating and doing lots to bring AI-powered elements into tools that have been around for a long time as well. There's new tools for due diligence as well. So due diligence is something that they've been trying for a very long time to really make some strides in the way in which it's done. It's actually been quite hard to do that, because what you really need for that to work incredibly well is the lawyers to spend the time in training very specifically what needs to go into these models. And it can be very complex, but there's been great strides made in that. And there's new startups proliferating. I've just seen another one, Wordsmith AI, that's just come out on the market. So there's teams, for example, that I helped to implement the launch of a new center of excellence for due diligence. Now, that center of excellence was all about how can we use multidisciplinary experts and the new AI-powered technology in order to supercharge the way due diligence is done and make it smarter, faster, leaner in the way that we do it for our clients. Now, that is just an example of, those are just some use cases, right? So, and then there's also other ways in which there's a lot of shaking up happening in the legal market around just access to justice with types of AI-powered tools that are able to really help, looking at case law, the construction of arguments. I actually also know of somebody who just managed to use just ChatGPT to win a case against an insurance company, and they didn't use a lawyer. So there's also this element of some people out there, obviously the more maverick types, who are trying to take on the powers that be and sometimes winning with the use of just straight up ChatGPT.
Free tools, yeah.
Yeah, free tools, exactly. So this just gives you a little example. I've just touched on a tiny element of it, but there's Disco, there's so many different ones that are looking at document review. Document review is one of the most obvious ones, because that, really lends itself to large volumes of data that we manage. They still need their 1LR, 2LR, so they need their first and second line reviews, and they need to have the lawyers involved in actually overseeing what's going on here. But there's a lot of work involved, whether it be legal project managers, legal process specialists, legal technologists, and also legal analysts coming into the fore, where they are not lawyers traditionally, but they are really coming in to absolutely help orchestrate large volume cases and matters in a much more different way that can mean it can be much more cost effectively managed for clients. So that's just one aspect. And I would say that the legal teams within large corporations are the ones that are most engaging those lawyers who are general counsel and legal teams within big, I'd say FTSE 500 kind of companies. Those are the ones that are doing the most exciting new work in one sense, because they are having to actually engage with these tools, hands-on, because they're being asked to take on brand new ways of doing things so that they can reduce their spend on external private practice law firms. So I'd say there is this slight change. You got lawyers who are on the ground in legal teams in big companies, maybe even also small companies, really grappling with new tools themselves and having to. And there's an increase in the amount of spend on AI powered tools. And then you've got the law firms where things are a bit more tentative, and they've got things in specific teams where people are piloting things, but they're still pretty much doing the bread and butter like they used to.